by her perspiration. Arousal and distraction, compounded by his reading, forbidden this attraction.
On the night Miguel was born, despite the comfort of others, I felt more alone than I have felt in my entire life. Luz was brave, not seeming to feel anything but anticipation for the birth of our son. As the birth progressed, I distracted myself by thinking back to the curious morning I was called to the labyrinth, some 6 weeks after my ship put in at Pirate's End. I hadn't been in Estolia long enough to understand half of what I saw in those first months, and that morning taught me nothing except how much I still didn't understand. When I'd first stepped off the ship, Antonio greeted me with both hands extended. I remember thinking it odd, though I couldn't have said why. Weeks later, in the labyrinth, candlelight catching on Key's carved walls, I stood by while Antonio asked that very question of his nephew, as though my arrival had become someone else's lesson. Young Xavier stood there with a capitulo too heavy for his arms, working out the meaning of a gesture I'd only just received myself. He extended both his own hands at last, and Antonio only said, "Insight, young Xavier," before turning to thank me and see me out. The tea hadn't even finished steeping. For a long while I wondered, what was Xavier taught that day? Why was I asked to stand there and offer nothing but my own confusion? Once Miguel was born, I realized that it was immaterial. Zamora, Montalvo, and Scrito.
Xavier watched his uncle carefully. From the time he prayed by the side of the green pond and subsequently broke his leg, the role he would one day fill fascinated him. He vowed during his convalescence that he would absorb everything there was possible to learn from his uncle's interactions with others.
Cousin Magdalena states that the two of you, particularly you, Xavier, have come to show a greater than average interest in the girls in your class.
Xavier looked from his uncle to his brother. Heat crept up the back of his neck. He did not know what to say. Antonio laughed softly, a kind, gentle sound.
The two of you are 17. It is normal to see the girls around you and start to desire them, physically and sexually.
Max was the one to respond to that. He looked scandalized.
But the girls in our class, they are daughters of Estolia.
And this means what?
Max looked from his uncle to his brother to his uncle again and said,
I am not sure, really sure, if taking a woman to bed is acceptable, but I am certain that taking a daughter of Estolia to bed prior to our 30th birthday will result in disaster. That would be breaking the promise.
His voice broke.
What do you think about your brother's assertions?
Antonio asked Xavier.
I am not certain if that would be breaking Zacharias's promise to deity, but it is clear that it is not acceptable.
So what do you suggest?
Antonio asked Xavier. Xavier closed his eyes, trying to purge the desires from his system. He had to be fully honest with his uncle. He opened his eyes.
I do not know how to stop thinking about.
He did not wish to name the girl he was fixated on. Max raised a hand and Antonio asked him to share his thoughts.
The problem is that it is natural at our age to want to take a woman to bed. Some of our ancestors visited women in Majorca and Ibiza, or on the mainland, to ease those urges. Others worked very hard to take their minds off the women around them.
Xavier, what would work for you?
Antonio asked. Xavier glanced at his brother.
I am not quite sure why it is not as hard for Max.
He paused in what he was saying and then let out a deep breath, trying to calm his body.
I cannot seem to stop thinking about it.
Have you been reading the capítulos?
Antonio, shrewd as ever, asked. Xavier nodded. The capítulos had fascinated him since he began studying the inscriptions from the mossy rock. Once he discovered the erotic parts, he forgot his research and focused instead on reading the parts that excited his body and his imagination.
I believe that the best choice right now for both of you is to end the school term a few days early. I know that the two of you have a project you have been talking about working on this summer. I would suggest that you focus on spending time together as brothers and do not spend time reading the capítulos for the summer. I believe that by the end of the summer, you both will learn greater control over your bodies and come to understand yourselves better.
Xavier felt a reluctance to stop reading the capítulos. He wanted to enjoy the sensations that were new to him since the previous summer, but his reluctance to do what the keeper asked him to do was a warning sign. He had to choose the correct pathway, regardless of how hard it would end up being. His eyes met Antonio's, and he felt a sense of gratitude that Antonio knew and honored his struggle, and in particular, that he accepted how hard it was for Xavier to do what was asked.
Max and I do have a project we need to work on. We will make certain that Mother and Father are okay with our continuing it, and once they agree, we will spend a number of days getting a sense of its scope before we are off and away. It might take us most of the summer to finish.
Springtime class is late in the day, losing all his concentration, wondering at its winding pathway, distracted by her perspiration.
They led 2 pack horses in addition to their own mounts. Their plan was to start with the waterfall secret and move on from there. They would explore the 7 secrets in order.
Why is it harder for me?
Xavier asked his brother. Max smiled at him with the smug smile that he used infrequently. Xavier recognized it. Max was savoring a rare moment, grasping something spiritual more quickly and more easily than Xavier did.
Twins come in all types.
He began.
Kavanaugh and Lorenzo, who were not identical. Identical twins like the 2 of us, and like Antiochus and Tremaine, and other types. But even identical twins are not totally identical. Sometimes one brother has greater strengths in some areas and greater weaknesses in others. Cousin Magdalena says that we are complementary identical twins. I think she is right. You have strengths that are my weaknesses. I have strengths that are your weaknesses. Brother, we are very blessed.
How so?
Xavier asked, thinking of the struggles he was still wrestling with. He did not feel at all blessed to be working through them. The memory of a drop of sweat zigging when he bet himself it would zag, and his desire to stop it from making the full journey, flooded through him.
Because, Zed, we have our own strengths and weaknesses. I believe that we will rule the nation better than many brothers. You like things I dislike, and I like things you dislike. Just like I have skills different from yours, and yours from mine. We're not likely to kill each other over a girl.
His voice was firm and satisfied at that sentiment.
We are going to depend on each other. Together we make one, whole, perfect man, able to see our nation into the future. It is like...
Max paused before continuing, his words slow and deliberate.
Most kings and keepers are brothers. They run Estolia together, but none of them are quite like Zacharias.
He smiled brightly as he concluded,
But together, we are Zacharias. I have his leadership skills and you have his spirituality. We will be very good for our nation.
They rode for some time while Xavier absorbed Max's words. There was something reassuring in having this analysis from his brother, but that did not resolve all his concerns. When he felt like he could trust himself to speak without his voice giving away the anxiety within, he asked,
But why do I have this issue and you do not?
Max did not answer right away. He clicked with his tongue, reassuring and guiding his horse around a hazard. After he praised the animal, he answered,
Father said that it has to do with energy. I was born active, while you were always a little less active. I am a lot better at using up my energy. You have a lot of extra energy, and this is the most obvious way to use it up.
Xavier was not sure Max had it right, but it was the best explanation he had heard so far. They rode on for some time before he sighed and turned his attention to the bridle trail they were following. They could see the shimmer of Lake Eternity through the folds of the hills that stood between them.
A single bead of sweat traces her shoulders slow. Heat he cannot forget catches him cheeks aglow.